humans hate making decisions.
We're doing just fine.
If you're going to be successful, if you're going to become a better man,
you got to take care of yourself.
You know, that thing called life calls, and you've got to do something about it.
A bottle of wine again.
There are times when you just think, fuck it, I just want to quit. Got to learn to do the exact opposite.
Starting today.
What is conversion rate optimization? It's kind of an obsession with testing.
Start small, think big.
So that's it. Thank you and good night. This has been Take Traction. You're welcome. Have I got to speak? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Take Traction Show. Guys, it's happening. It's GDPR time. What are you doing about it? It is the General Data Protection Regulation, and if you're not doing something about it, then you know there's trouble around the corner for you. So we've got a super interesting episode for you today, because we are going to be diving into what is GDPR and what it means to you, how you should be, what you should be doing about this, and how it's going to affect your company in e-commerce. Because at the end of the day, the GDPR is quite a wide-ranging thing, and not every part necessarily relates to us. We're not necessarily running some massive big tech startup here. We may be just running an e-commerce company where we're collecting some data for remarketing purposes, or we're sending out email campaigns. But nonetheless, it does affect you, and you need to be doing something about it. So that's what we're going to be diving into in today's show. Now, I must say before we jump into this, and you'll hear me say this again in a minute in the actual show, but quick disclaimer, this is not legal advice in the slightest, so go and seek legal advice. Don't take our word on this. We are just trying to shed some light on some of the complex language from this new European regulation, because it's kind of unclear what it actually means. So that is the only intention of this podcast. Please go and seek legal advice from a data protection officer, and make sure you are doing things correctly for your business. You won't regret it, because the fines for this thing are massive. We're talking $20 million, guys. Don't cock this one up. So stay tuned, listen to today's show. You're going to learn something, whatever the case, but do make sure that after the show you go and seek some proper legal advice, so that you make sure that you're doing this thing correctly. That's all for now. Enjoy the show. So we are on air, Christian. How you doing, buddy?
We are. All good, Charlie.
What's going on? What's going on with you?
I've been doing a lot of research on GDPR, and it's crazy. Everybody went nuts.
Yeah, it's a kind of complicated subject. It's going to be interesting to discuss it in this podcast. So I've seen a bunch of people. Obviously, I guess everyone's had their email inboxes absolutely pretty much spammed by every company that they've ever signed up to in their lives, in the last couple of weeks, with new terms and conditions, new privacy policies, and asking for consent and opt-ins and all that kind of stuff. So there've been a bunch of companies, usually the larger companies, pretty worried about this thing and trying to get on top of it as quickly as possible. Even so, they've still left it until the last minute, because we knew about this 2 years ago. We'll go into all the details in a minute. But everyone has had this last minute scramble to try and get all this shit sorted out. And there are some companies who are just not doing anything about it. And I'm still getting emails from people who are trying to collect data from me and asking me which email service provider I want to use and this kind of stuff. And it's do you not realize that there's some seriously big changes going on at the moment with the whole world of data? So yeah. Interesting subject.
I think they don't realize it. Even today, even my godfather asked me, what is all the fuss about the GDPR? And he said, it's not all bad. I've done nothing, but it's not. How bad can it get? And I said, well, 4% of your global revenue is what will happen if you don't comply.
Or
and
two, right.
I gotta.
Let's go into that.
20 million.
2 million.
Right.
2 million. Is it 2 million or 20 million? 20 million,
20
exactly.
million. Yeah, whichever is higher.
Right.
So I got him scared enough so I got a call from him and I had to explain what's going on.
Is it 20? Are you sure? I thought it was 2.
I think it's 20. It's 4 million, 4% or 20 million euros.
Okay. That surprised me. I thought it was 2 million. Or 1 million for data leaks that haven't been reported.
Data leaks, yeah. Within the 72 hours range.
Yeah. Okay. Well, right. So let's start with what is GDPR for people wondering. And before we go into anything on this podcast, let's just clarify one thing. This is not legal advice in the slightest. If the only thing you do about GDPR is listen to this podcast, and you take our advice on it, then you are not doing enough. Right? The advice we're giving is our opinion, our speculation from what we've researched. We are not legal advisors and we don't really have a clue what we're doing, but we can do some research on this stuff and hopefully help you get a better understanding of what is going on with GDPR. And the fact is we need to do this stuff for ourselves anyway. So this research has been a very good process for us to know how to implement this in our different companies and things. So hopefully this information will help you, but it is by no means legal advice. Go and seek advice from a data protection officer or whatever they're called. All right.
Or a lawyer.
Really should. Or a lawyer, whatever. Yeah.
We're not either.
Exactly.
Not yet.
So with that said, what the hell is GDPR? GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. Is that what it's called?
That's the name.
So it is basically, I got some notes here. It's Europe's new framework for data protection laws. It replaces the previous 1995 Data Protection Directive. So basically what's happened is that we have since 1995, or in 1995, the European Union agreed on data protection laws. And since then, like, so much has changed. We could have never predicted what kind of data we were going to be handling within companies and the amount of data, the kind of data war that we're dealing with in in 2018. We could have never predicted that in 1995. So a lot of the things that were put in place, a lot of the laws that were created at that time, really aren't suitable for now, for 2018. So it's been long due a revision. I mean, you just think how much has changed with the internet since 1995. Obviously, a lot has changed, and the types of startups we've got nowadays, and the whole fact that, a venture capitalist doesn't look to invest in it or what, it's not cool to earn money in a startup anymore, right? It's cool to earn data. And that's really, really changed the whole way we are managing information about people. And so it kind of makes sense. And I personally think this is a really, really good move. It's going to screw up a lot of companies to begin with, and it's going to take some time to get used to how to deal with these things. And there are going to be a lot of changes, not only now as we're about to implement as this law is about to come into place, but more so over the coming year. We're going to see a lot of platforms change, and a lot of kind of the pre-existing platforms that we use to run our businesses are going to integrate GDPR precautions into them, and it will all become very much a normal thing after a year or two, I assume. So with that said, I think it's going to be a great thing because we are screwing with information about people. We've been using people's data in ways that are just brutal to all this, it just gets more and more crazy as time goes on, but the amount of customization we can do on, just the way we advertise to people, where we know what they're interested in, what they like, where they've been on holiday, how many family members they've got, how many brothers and sisters, how old they are, and all this stuff. And the truth of the matter is, 99% of the people that you are running these kinds of advertising campaigns for or to, they don't have a clue that you've got their data. They don't know how you've got it. It's the typical thing. I look at my, if I speak with someone from my family who's not necessarily, tech savvy, and they've been shopping on the internet one day and they've seen a really nice dress, and then the next day they suddenly see an advert on a different website for the same dress. They go, "Oh my God, I can't believe I saw that advert. What a coincidence." And you go,
or if they didn't buy that product on that website, if they leave the website,
that's exactly what I'm
be
saying.
Bombarded.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And the fact is, they don't have a clue that their data is being collected and that information is being collected. So personally, I think it's a really good move. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's a good move, or it's a pain in the ass, and that's
I've
it?
I've always found, even remarketing for that matter, I found it really invasive. And there was no way to restrict it unless you've installed a plugin, and even that wouldn't stop your data collection.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the other thing, right? In smaller companies, half the smaller companies don't even know that they're collecting data, right? If you're Google, then sure, you're managing your data and you know what you're doing with data. But if you're a smaller e-commerce company, you don't know that you're collecting data. You don't know how you're doing it. You're just using the tools that are provided to you, right? You're collecting data by using the Facebook pixel and a Google AdWords script. You're collecting data by offering a free ebook or a discount, and then you're storing that user's information so that you can market to them. But that's just even if it's through a third-party application, it's still 100%.
Your fault.
It's your responsibility, and you are handling the data. So that's a good, I don't have any notes on this actually, but that's a good point. So there's a difference between data processors and data, I can't think what it's called now, data something. So a data processor could be a third party application that's processing your data for you, but you are still the owner of that data. And there's a very important distinction. So let's just get some of these things out of the way. So basically what happened was in April 2016, after 4 years or more than 4 years of negotiations, officials, within the European Union, I don't know which department, but officials have agreed upon a European General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. So this was April 2016, and what they did was they gave, so I think the report was officially published on May 2016. So what they did was they gave everyone 2 years to prepare themselves for this change. And implementation of this new General Data Protection Regulation is May 25th, 2018. So if you're listening to this podcast when it's just come out, you should be listening to it on Tuesday, the 22nd. So we got 3 days until this thing is implemented. But the crazy thing is we've all had 2 years. We've all had 2 years to prepare for this. All of a sudden though, there's been a very big panic at the end and it's crunch time, and stuff's got to get done. So what happens if you don't comply? And this has been one of the really big topics as well. I think one of the reasons that it's got quite so much attention is that number one, everyone is handling so much data. We don't even know how much data we're really handling or what we're doing with it. And now the price of not knowing what you're doing and having errors, or handling data incorrectly is now going to be a 20 million euro fine or 4% of annual turnover, whichever is higher. I want to check that out. Are you sure it's 20 million? GDPR, fine. It's 20 million.
Those are the correct figures.
It's 20 million. I thought it was 2. I don't know why I was thinking that. Yeah.
Well, they do want to hurt anyone that won't comply. And how do you hurt a big company? Right.
Exactly. This is the thing, right? And previously there were fines in place, and there's been kind of data protection regulations in place. Just they haven't been really very well not executed. What's the word? I can't think what the word is. Implemented or governed. So it's been very rare that someone has been fined for such things, and it's depended on the certain regulations within different countries as well. But usually you were talking about a fine of $500,000 or something like that. Now we're talking 20 million euros or 4% of your annual turnover, whichever's higher. So bear in mind, if you're a small company, I mean, let's face it, the odds of them investigating you as a fairly small company are pretty low. But if you're turning over $1 million per year, then you're going to get a 20 million fine. Say goodbye to your business. That's it. It's over. So pay attention. It's important. So the reason we wanted to do this podcast, I guess, really is because it's so damn confusing. So you can read through, I think it's like 18 pages or 80 pages maybe, for the GDPR, the entire report. The problem is, even if you read through the entire thing, it's very hard to decipher the information to understand what it means for you and how it's going to affect your business. So I thought it would be really good to go through some of these points and try and break this down into layman's terms. Again, this isn't legal advice, but this is what we make of the information that we've been going through on this new GDPR stuff. So with that, let's jump into some of the most important compliance points. Basically, I'm going to give a quick summary here and then we can go through each of the points in more detail. The general idea of this is that people, users, right, of your company, people, anyone that interacts with your company or your business or your brand needs to be warned about, consent to, have access to, and have control over their personal data. So they need to be warned about the collection of their personal data. They need to consent to the collection of their personal data, have access to be able to see what data you are collecting on them, and then have control over it, be able to decide exactly what data they want to give you and stop you from using data, even if they've already consented to it in the past. So that really is the general idea of what's going on here. But let's break it down a bit. So we've got personal data and sensitive personal data. These are two things that come up quite a lot when you go through the report, and it's, it's obviously something of importance just in the way of defining the different types of data here. So we've got personal data. Personal data can be anything that allows a living person to be directly or indirectly identified. This may be a name, an address, or even an IP address. So even an IP address can identify an individual. It includes automated personal data and can also encompass pseudonymized data if a person can be identified from it. And then we got sensitive personal data. GDPR calls sensitive personal data as being in special categories of information. These include trade union membership, religious beliefs and political opinions, racial information and sexual orientation. This is all the shit that Facebook's managing, right? All of your interest groups on Facebook. So it's kind of interesting I'm really intrigued to see how Facebook's going to be able to continue managing this data. One of the biggest things is that you can still manage people's data, providing it has been encrypted. So providing it's pseudonymized, or however the hell you say that. So that's a really important thing. But the issue is, that a lot of encrypted kind of data, and technologies aren't completely foolproof. And the fines for not having, if you've got your data encrypted and you're managing data and you think that you've got everything absolutely locked up, encrypted, and no one can ever trace it back to any user, if there's an error in your system, you could be facing seriously big fines. And that's kind of the risk that I think these big data management companies are going to be facing, such as Facebook. They're really going to have to be very, very careful moving forward with this stuff. So we then have consent must be given in an easy to understand, accessible form with a clear written purpose for the user to sign off on. And there must be an easy way for the user to reverse the consent. So what that means is, so someone signing up to your newsletter does not mean that they've given consent for you to then market to them, for you to then, to sell their information to another company, for you to then display adverts to them. They have to consent to all these different uses of their data from now on. And not only do they have to consent, if you manage to get someone to say, yes, I allow, Take Traction to, use my data to provide custom, recommendations to me via email or via ads on Facebook and AdWords, right? If someone says that, right, you've got the consent, but you then have to have a very clear and easy way for them to revoke that consent, for them to take the consent back, for them to opt out of consent. We've been dealing with opt-ins and opt-outs of email marketing for years, and that's all due to, I think, the 1995 regulation that was implemented. But we haven't been applying that to different areas of data. So it's going to be that same kind of thing. The way we've had to have this opt-in, opt-out for emails, and that's been the law for a long time now. We're now going to have to do that for everything, every bit of data that we manage for users. So that's that. any data breach that is likely to result in, air quotations here, result in a risk for the rights and freedoms of individuals, it's kind of intense, must be reported within 72 hours of its discovery. There are large fines for not doing so. We've got I've put 1 million, I think it's 10 million euros or 2% of annual turnover, whichever is greatest. That's for a data breach that isn't reported within 72 hours. So if
it happened a lot of times where big companies had data breaches and nobody paid for it.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at this damn Cambridge Analytics thing.
Yep.
Which, I mean, it's
Cambridge
kind of
Analytica, I guess.
Analytica, is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think it's been kind of good timing for that to have happened as well, because it's really brought to light a lot of the potential problems with data management. So I think this is why it's received so much media attention as well now, because Facebook's screwed up massively with this. They've had a big data breach right before these new laws come into place, which would imply massive penalties, massive fines. So they've gotten away very lightly, I think, really, with what's happened. But, if that kind of stuff continues to happen in the future, then it will seriously damage their businesses. It's damaged their reputation a little bit with Facebook at the moment, but it hasn't had a massive impact that it could have had, now that we're going to have these GDPR regulations in place, or GDPR.
Well, if Facebook had to pay 2 or 4% out of their total annual turnover,
imagine
that would be all over the news. And
Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, their credibility would go down, and I guess it'll hurt them a lot more than the 2% or the 4%.
Well, I don't know. I think 4% of annual turnover for a company like Facebook would seriously damage Facebook. I think it would cause some serious damage. But yeah, either way, it's going to be big news. So big companies are going to have to, or data management companies are seriously going to have to be careful now. The penalties are massive. Here's another thing. Kids, basically, because kids are more vulnerable and less aware of risks, GDPR includes guidance that includes parental consent for children up to age of 16. My advice, and again, this is not official legal advice, just don't even collect any data from anyone that is not over the age of 16. Confirm this is another thing. We're going to have so many different opt-ins on things now. We're going to have to confirm that anyone signing up to something is over the age of 16, right? It doesn't matter if you're selling, doesn't matter if you're selling a car or if you're selling a business book or whatever it is, and you assume that everyone, should be over the age of 16. You cannot assume. You must get kind of confirmation from the user that they are over the age of 16. So,
which most of the times will be a lie, but you got to comply.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, that's the user's responsibility as well. You have to take all precautions. I mean, it's your responsibility as a business owner and a data handler to take all precautions, right? To do everything possible.
Yeah.
Providing that is done, it's then the user's responsibility. And if the user is going to be careless with their data, then that is the user's responsibility at the end of the day. So there we go. So, then we've got, privacy policies. You've seen them in your inbox. You've seen emails coming in day after day about privacy policy updates from companies at the moment. And the reason is it's now got to be publicly accessible. I think that was always the case anyway. We've always been obliged to have terms and conditions and privacy policies and cookie policies and things like that. So we've got here, it's got to be publicly accessible, and it has to outline all processes related to personal data, and it must be written in a language that is easy to understand, clearly indicating and implying the true intent of the use of a user's data. So we've always had to do this stuff with privacy policies anyway, but GDPR's really, stressing the fact that it needs to be very clear and easy to understand, language in your privacy policy, and you need to clearly demonstrate what your intention is with someone's data. So not using some technical language to say that we may use it to support our growth and systemic and whatever, no, we're talking about saying it very clearly. We will use it to show, to to create adverts, to develop email marketing campaigns, whatever it is. You just have to be really, really clear and concise with it. Which is why I think we've seen so many updates there in privacy policies. So the final thing I've got on a lot of these really important points is that customers must be able to easily access their personal information, right? You need to be able to provide, with extreme ease, all personal information about any of your users. It needs to be very easy for a user to say, I want to know exactly what information this company's got about me or on me, and you need to be able to provide it. So it's going to be kind of complicated. It's going to be complicated because we're going to have, I don't know, at least the way I imagine it, we're going to have user login areas for people who aren't even members of a platform. If you've got just a basic blog or just a basic blog where you don't currently have a login area for people, I think we're going to have login areas now for any kind of website so that people can at least log in to view their data, right, and manage their data. What do you think, Christian? That's what I make of this.
I don't think if you're a simple blogger and the only thing you're doing is tracking information about users using analytics, then you might just have an option saying, I want to opt out from being tracked by analytics. And this we can discuss it later on, but this can be easily done with a small snippet from analytics that will actually clear information about that user. So analytics won't track that information anymore.
But
I'm not sure about Facebook.
Right, but that's just analytics. Then you've got a bunch of different things. You're using data for all sorts of different things. It's not just analytics. It
depends on what you're doing on the blog, yeah.
Yeah. If you're doing, let's say with a blog, a simple blog, right? We're not talking about a massive data collection company like, I don't know, Slack or something. Just a blog, and you have email marketing that you're using people's data for. You're running Facebook ads. You're running AdWords ads. You're maybe running Twitter or LinkedIn ads as well.
That complicates things.
You're then using people's data in analytics as well. If you're using all these different platforms, what are you going to do? Maybe these platforms are going to provide us with all these different scripts and things that we can put on our website, but we're going to have about 100 pop-ups when someone lands on our website saying, do you consent to cookies? Do you consent for Google to collect your data? Do you consent for Facebook to do this? Do you consent for us to send you email marketing campaigns? And all these different things.
From what I've read, a good way to comply to GDPR is by having a small pop-up on the website that's obviously that it needs to be visible, and that states what you're doing in just a phrase that states what you're doing with users' cookies, and then have a link to the privacy policy where you can have all these opt-out links, or I agree button that makes them continue reading.
Oh, right. Yeah. And the problem is it's not valid for people to say, for you to have a pop-up that says, by using this website, you are consenting for us to use your data in this way. They have to opt into all these things, right? And the problem is, so I understand that, right? If you've got Google Analytics and you've got an opt-out area in your privacy policy, right? Google Analytics is doing things based on cookies, and it's taking your IP address and things like that. Maybe it's not taking your personal information so technically it is personal data, IP address, yeah. But it's not taking your information such as your name or where you live or your email address or something. Now, if you are collecting email addresses, which almost every company is, and you're probably collecting a first name or something as well, maybe a phone number, then you can't have an opt-out without someone first logging in for you to be able to identify the user in order to opt them out from that data collection. Right?
Well, you would need to have a form on the website for people to subscribe to your newsletter or do anything. So you would, the law would say you need to agree with these terms, but that checkbox should be unticked.
Right, but my point being, how can you identify the person that is opting out unless they sign in first, so you can know who's opting out of your data collection?
Oh yeah, in that case, if you're using forms, then definitely you need an account.
This is what I'm thinking, and this is what's going to be really important. I mean, at the moment, you may have your data spread all across the place. You may be using ActiveCampaign or some email marketing automation tool to really is your kind of CRM. You're collecting leads through a form on your website, and you are storing them within your CRM, which is often at times nowadays your marketing automation software as well. So let's say ActiveCampaign, you've got a bunch of leads in there. You've got names, you've got email addresses, but then those same people, you're also going to have cookies that are being collected by Google, but it's you that's managing that data, right? Google's the data processor. You're then going to have bits and pieces all around the place. So what's going to be really important now is to try and bring all of that data together into the same place, so you can really keep a track of what's going on and allow people to have control over it.
So it'll simplify things for you, as the publisher.
Exactly. So I think what we're going to see, and what we're actually already seeing, I've seen a lot of information from Drip and ActiveCampaign and companies like that. They're going to be bringing out a lot of ways to add certain forms and areas to your website where people can opt out from certain things. So we're going to see a lot of development from existing tools that we use in this area, and it's going to help us. It's going to make things a lot easier. But what you can't do is just depend on these tools and expect that because you think the tool is GDPR compliant, your company is, right? At the end of the day, you're going to be responsible for it. If there's any cock up, if there's any mess up, if ActiveCampaign messes up, and you have a data breach, it's you that's had the data breach, right? And you are the one that's liable for the fines. So you can't just depend on these tools at the moment. So another thing is that the GDPR documentation says that larger companies or companies that are processing large amounts of data. Now, I don't really know what that means. It's kind of a bit of a blurry.
It's ambiguous, isn't it?
Yeah. But companies that are processing large amounts of data have to hire dedicated personnel to manage all aspects of GDPR compliant. They need to have a data protection officer within the company. Which is kind of interesting, and I guess it's kind of important. Again, it all makes sense, really. It's like, how can you be managing so much information about people without having someone within the company to monitor the way in which you're processing that information, that data? Really, it all makes sense. It's going to be a pain in the backside for a lot of people to implement this stuff, and they're going to have to open up new departments. What we're going to have to see as well is a lot of, we're going to have to see the kind of, we're going to have to bring together IT departments and marketing departments, because the problem that we have as marketers, that marketers don't necessarily know. They know what they're doing with the data. They don't know where the data comes from or how it's being stored or handled. So we're going to have to try and bring together the two departments within larger companies, so that there's this good loop between the two, so we've got this feedback and there's no stepping out of line and non-compliance, essentially. So that's that. So larger companies are going to have to get data protection officers in. So let's jump on to some advice, Christian. Some stuff that.
By the way, just so you know, I've subscribed to a data protection officer course, and by sometime next week, I think I'm going to be a data protection officer, which might help us. I'm going to be learning a lot more information than we actually know.
That's going to be really good. It's going to be really good. Yeah, exactly. And, I wanted to quickly touch on this as well. The reason this is kind of news, right? And the reason we're not doing this in the Oppie News podcast is because this is kind of timeless information right now. GDPR is being implemented in 3 days' time, from the release of this podcast. It it's not going anywhere, right? So it doesn't matter if you're listening to this in 2019, 2020. If there are things that you're listening to and you think you may be non-compliant, go and do something about it. Because the risks will still be there in 2020, 2022, whenever you're listening to this, do something about it, all right? Make sure you've got everything checked out properly and that you are fully compliant. Cause at the end of the day, it's just doing things the right way as well. I think this is a really big, people are going to be really worried. You can no longer just get someone to download your ebook and then start marketing to them, right? That's changed. That's gone. And that's what we've been doing for the past 20 years. Now it's going to be a case of people deciding if they want to be marketed to. And you know what we're going to have as a result of that? We're going to have we're going to have less leads. We're going to have less data, but we're going to have better quality data, better quality leads, more engaged customers, people who love our brands, people who interact with our brands. We're going to have to build better brands. We're going to have to build brands with personality, with character, with a great image. But ultimately, we're going to have a better quality of interaction with our users.
Yeah, we gotta become smarter when it comes to messaging. So if we want to get more people to opt in, we gotta be smart with the messaging. We gotta tell the right story, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is it's not necessarily being smart. Yeah, I know what you mean. You got to be you got to be smart to try and get people to opt into things. But it's very much a case of, do you want to do it? And you're going to have that you very much cannot be, there can't be any trickery in what you're doing. You cannot fool people into opting into stuff. That is highly against the GDPR compliance stuff. So you have to be very clear. But I think ultimately, if we're creating amazing brands that people love to interact with, then there isn't going to be any problem. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be really difficult.
It would be difficult for
startups.
What do you do in that case?
I'm super interested. I've got a friend he's an economist. He works in a private investment fund, and he has probably 3 or 4 meetings with different startups every day to look at investment opportunities. And they've kind of heavily invested in companies that don't generate revenue. They're companies that focus on collecting data, and they've been doing that for the past couple of years. And I was saying to him, you got to be careful, because a lot of these big companies that have massive amounts of data, they're going to be screwed. They're going to be screwed for the next year or two. It's not to say that everything is going to correct itself. Everything's going to right itself. But at first, there's going to be a really big setback, I think, with some of these companies. You see so many Silicon Valley startups that their objective has been for years to just collect data. They've been working in debt or with debt. They've been growing a company with debt for years just to collect more data. And all of a sudden now their data is going to be chopped down by maybe 80%, as they have to return and get everyone to opt into certain things and consent to the use of their data, perhaps in a way that was never done the first time round. So, big companies that we see, I even think companies like Asana, for example, Asana that doesn't charge any money for you to use them, or Slack, that most people that use Slack are using it for free. They've been collecting data on people for years. And now they're going to have to go back. If you think startups got 1 million users, right, to keep it simple, they're going to have to reach out to all users and get consent for certain things. And of that, how many people are going to opt back into stuff? Maybe 15, 20%. It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how those companies survive this period.
And if people don't comply by the 25th of May, how can you send emails without people's consent? Even though you're trying to send an email to tell them how they can opt out.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I mean there's certain leeway with things as well, but that's why it's kind of important for people to have prepared for this before the 25th of May to get certain things in place so you don't have those problems. You can do as much as you want now. You can email people and get that consent without having any problems. But yeah, that's something that people definitely have to look into. So we've got a few things noted down here for some ways in which you can start trying to make sure that your brand is GDPR compliant. And I think so the user login area, I think, is going to be a really, really big thing. It's, in the same way that you can log into any tool that you use and you can go to settings and you can change your address or your phone number or your tax number or something like that. I think we're going to have that for every person we interact with nowadays. I don't know. Again, this is just, speculation, opinion, but I think that's going to be the most secure way to begin working with people's data. Certainly if you are collecting, email addresses or anything kind of in that area, email addresses, phone numbers and names and things like that. Cookies we can be, we're working with even without people ever having signed up to something. So that can be done without having a login area. But the management of people's data so far as email addresses, names, phone numbers, IP addresses, and then what emails they want to be receiving, what adverts they want to be seeing and all that kind of stuff, they're going to have access to it. That's one thing that's 100% certain. They're going to have access to it somewhere, somehow.
I guess the vast majority of websites will collect at least emails.
Right.
If not more.
That's why I keep coming back to the email thing.
So I do agree that a section on your website where people can manage their data is the simplest, although it might be tricky to implement at first, but it's the simplest and easiest and safest way to manage all of this.
It's in my mind at least, it's the most transparent way to begin dealing with this, right? You can try and be clever and do this, that and the other. I think the best thing moving forward is just to be as honest and transparent as possible with the way that people's data is being used. And, if you get someone who says to you, I want to receive your newsletter, I want to be shown customized ads and things like that, then that person is going to be such an amazing lead for you, such an amazing user. It comes back to, I've literally got a note here. It comes back to the 1000 True Fans by Kevin Kelly. If you haven't read the article, go and read it. Just search 1000 True Fans on Google and you'll find it. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. It's, this whole concept that you don't need to have 1 million followers on Facebook or something. With 1000 true fans, people who are willing to buy anything that you put out there, people who believe in you, believe in your company, like your brand, like interacting with your brand, then that is enough to live off of. That's the whole concept of 1000 true fans. And I think that's very much, we've been slowly moving more and more towards that as time's gone on. We've seen the growth of smaller brands. We've removed the retailer from what from commerce, right? For years we had this massive retail industry where brands created products and retailers then bought the products from them and sold them on to the consumer. And we've had this slow development of, thanks to the internet, direct brand to consumer sales. And a lot more interaction with, brands are actually getting to know their users, right? They're getting to know their customers for the first time, really. Only over the last 15, 20 years. And that never really happened before. So it's, we've been working towards this much more open, transparent, direct to consumer relationships. And I think the more we do that, the better business the more honest commerce and business we're going to have in the world. So I think it's a good move and it's helping us take us towards that, really. But you've got to get on board. You've got to try and cut all the spammy stuff. Stop trying all the black hat shit and start doing things legitimately. Start running a legitimate business. It's literally like SEO, right? For years, everyone was just trying to cheat the system. And everyone goes, well, what's SEO now? Okay, right. There's some SEO tactics, and you can go and pump a bunch of keywords into your website and get backlinks and blah, blah, blah. But what is SEO truly about? It's about creating great content that people actually enjoy and interact with. And that's kind of a great analogy for what's going on here with the privacy stuff, with data protection. It's about being transparent, being honest, and making people want to be receiving what you're showing them. If people don't want to see it, then why are you showing it to them? So I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be good in that sense.
Because a lot of people hope that they might convince them ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it all over and over where, a lot of people would do black hat just because it worked. It worked and they were making a lot of money. But when they got hit by the Google update, they were all angry. But nobody said, well, yeah, I did black hat. Now I got to comply or I'm not going to make any money. I'm not going to make the same amount of money as I did before, but I got to comply or I'm not going to make any money.
I mean, at the end of the day, making illegitimate money or making money from someone who shouldn't have given you that money in the first place. That's not the way to do business, right? Fine. You're going to make money. Good for you.
Exactly.
But be a fucking human being at the end of the day, right? We got to change things.
Have principles.
Exactly. Yeah. The we world, right? We got to help each other. So a few things here. So this is just a few things that I've kind of noted down. And Christian, you've got a few things here as well. Just a few ideas that I think could be good ways to start trying to implement this within your brand. I've written down here to add a manage my data and notification settings link to all emails. So we've had the opt-in and opt-out stuff with emails. It's been obligatory to have an opt-out or an unsubscribe link on all emails for a long time now. I think it's going to be really valuable. I don't think it's obligatory, but I think it's going to be really valuable to have a manage my data and notification settings link on all your emails so that people can go to that login area and say, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you're sending someone an email, they should have signed up in the first place, right? They've given you their email. So you're going to have their information in Klaviyo or MailChimp or somewhere. So give them a login area where they can go and opt out or opt in to all the different, types of newsletters, all the different types of, advertising and data management. Right. I think it's just an easy way to make yourself really compliant with all your email marketing. Make sure you're not going to be getting into any trouble there. Another thing, remind people in all emails that they're receiving the email because they opted in. We've had to do this for quite some time as well, but I think it's going to be really important now. And also reminding them that they can cancel at any time and giving them a link to cancel from that opt-in. Again, maybe back to this kind of user area, this login area. I think it's really important to remind people because now we're not just talking about people opting in because they gave us their email address. We're talking about people putting their email address in to download an ebook or something and then actually having to check boxes to say, I want to receive notifications from you guys. So if they've done that, it's been a conscious decision that they've made. So let's remind them in our emails and make sure that we're not getting any trouble. Christian, you there?
Yeah.
I can hear you, no problem.
I've lost you for the last 10 seconds or so.
No worries.
What happened?
Anyway, so.
Moving on.
Make cookies pop up a button. So again, none of this stuff by saying, by navigating this website, you accept our cookies policy. That doesn't count anymore. You need to have a button that people click or a checkbox or something that people, opt into to confirm that they give their consent to collect cookies, right? Or to drop cookies on their browser.
Yep.
What have you got here? Is this something? So this is something from you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. My apologies. I've added it
without go for it.
Notifying you. So a lot of the times, or most of the times, people would use analytics or Facebook to track people's actions on their website, right? And the GDPR law says you gotta offer people the ability to stop tracking their information.
Right.
And analytics came in supporting any website that wants to offer this option. You can do it either by offering users a browser plugin, the Google Analytics browser opt-out browser add-on.
Okay.
The problem with this one is it cannot serve as a general solution because some browsers are not compatible with such a plugin, especially those on mobile devices. Another option would be suggest ad blockers, but this would imply that you gotta let people know that on your privacy policy page they will find options, so their information will not get tracked anymore.
How does the ad blockers thing work? I don't really get that.
Well, the browser actually tracks or gets injected with a cookie.
Yeah.
And an ad blocker would stop that cookie from being recorded.
Right,
by the
but
browser.
the problem is I personally don't see that as being valid because we're going to have, the whole point is that someone has to opt in, not block you from doing it. They have to opt in the first place.
Exactly. These are just some of the suggestions people made on online. I've picked just the ones that were actually valid, or at least near valid. Yeah, interesting. And the third one, which I think it's the best option you could have on your website, is use an opt-out link that's being offered by Google Analytics. You install a snippet code on your website, and whenever people click on your link, it'll tell Analytics to stop recording data from that user, from that session.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be it. It's going to have to be opt-out links. You've got to let people opt out. You can't force them to install some plugin or something like that to try and, so that they can stop having their cookies tracked. You've got to just let them have a button, an easy way for them to opt out. Right. Yeah. That's what you've got there. I can see. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead with that. Yeah.
All right. So, you shouldn't have silent opt-in forms or any default consent for that matter. None of your forms should have pre-selected boxes to gain consent from users.
Can I give a quick example of that? The typical thing you have, excuse me, when someone makes a purchase, excuse me, I don't know what's going on. I don't smoke, by the way, guys. I have a weird cough all the time. So the typical thing, right? I mean, if you use Shopify, you have this as an option in your settings in Shopify. Perhaps they've changed it now. I don't know, but you have, when someone makes a purchase, you have a checkbox for people to subscribe to newsletters. And up until now, you've had the option to decide whether to have the checkbox automatically checked or checked by default or not checked by default. Now, I've always had it checked by default on any of my stores because I want people, when they make a purchase, I want them to have to uncheck, like click the box so that it's unchecked, in order to not receive my newsletters, right? My emails and stuff like that. So now that's no longer going to be valid. You can't have that box pre-selected, pre-checked on your checkout. I think that's just a really typical example where most people do, collect. The easiest way to collect an email, right, is by making a sale. So if you make a sale, you're going to collect someone's email. Then, you got to make sure that they are then deciding that they want to receive further information or ads or emails or whatever from you. It's no longer valid just to say, we're going to automatically check this box that says that you're going to opt into our newsletter. No, they have to check the box.
Right.
Go on then, what you got here?
No, that's it. The rest is yours, I guess.
Okay. All right, so we have got, I've got another thing here. Add a user, that's all the stuff we've already gone through. When people sign up to a newsletter or download a lead magnet, ask them to check boxes so that the data can be used or certain emails can be sent to them. This is it, really. The bottom line is be as transparent as possible. If someone doesn't want to receive information, then that's fine. You're better off without them, right? Get rid of them. Don't waste your time, money, and effort on people that don't want to be receiving information from you. And And I think the final thing is it's not just about being transparent. It's about being very careful with the way you manage your data. So making sure that you've got your data pretty locked up and that no one else can get access to your data. A breach of your data that you're collecting on people could be very risky. You know, you may have a CSV file of thousands of email addresses that you've collected somewhere. If you lose that CSV file, if you put it on Google Drive and make it open to anyone who has the link, then you could be facing a serious data breach and some seriously heavy fines. So be very careful with the way you're managing your data. And go and seek advice. Go and seek advice from, you know, you can go and get consultations. People are making a fortune off of this at the moment, but you can go and get pretty much free consultations for half an hour out there. And you know, you don't necessarily need to go and hire someone. You can go and pay someone, you know, a few $100s to go and get some advice for a couple of hours and know whether you're running any risks, whether you're doing things correctly or not, or what things you should be doing or implementing on your website beyond the advice that we've given you today. So I'd highly recommend doing that. And that's everything. That's everything for me. Have you got anything else?
That's it. Just go for quality, not quantity.
Quality,
just
not quantity.
Filter everyone.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. Think 1,000 true fans, right? Get the people that matter and stop wasting your time on the people that don't matter. Stop getting spammy leads, and start doing things legitimately. Start making sure that people really want to be interacting with your brand in the way that you're trying to force them to do up until now. You know, start making sure that people really want to be involved with you. And you won't have any problems. I think, you know, just make sure you're doing things correctly and seek advice. Seek advice as quickly as possible. Get it done. You've got 3 days. Implement it now. Get it done. They're going to be cracking down on people. And I think we're going to have, you know, some news, some big news releases in the coming year of people who haven't been compliant with GDPR, and they're going to be facing some serious fines. And, you know, it's going to be larger companies to begin with, inevitably. But, we can expect them to start cracking down on smaller companies as we move on with this. So just make sure you're doing things correctly. That's everything from me. Anything else you want to add, Christian?
That's it. No, that's it. I think we went through most everything.
All right, then. That is all. As always, I have been Charlie Center.
And I've been Cristiano Brer.